The following program is a Town of Colony television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Top of the day, I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Celebrating the human spirit.
And we are storytellers. And we're actually really pleased today because we've got a special idea on our program today, which is really one of the most wonderful things to ever happen.
In the Capital District.
Right, about storytelling. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful things in our community, but this is about storytelling. And we're going to come to that, but that was just...
Super extra special.
This is just a tease to get you started, get you in anticipation of learning more about this great event.
Don't change the channel, no.
But before we do that, I got to ask my question to Kate, because we'd like to share things we've been doing with stories and storytelling. So what's the most interesting thing you've been doing?
Well, the most fun for me is I told a new story up at the Storytelling Open Mic at Cafe Lena. And I incorporated something into it that the audience just jumped right into it. There was a refrain of, we will rock him. We will.
Some of us didn't go as much as the other ones did.
And I was wearing cowboy boots that night because the weather was good, and I don't wear them when there's any salt or and it was just perfectly splendid. I'm not sure it served the story, but I guess it did. That wasn't my concern. I wanted to use the shtick.
Now, for me, I loved that. I mean, even though I didn't get all the clapping and stomping down, because one of the things that I love best in storytelling, next to the big event that's going to come to start is going up to Cafe Lena. And if you haven't been in Cafe Lena since they renovated it, it's even better. It's got that old feeling, but that new feeling, and you've got a wonderful field of sight that you can see the performers. And it is just like a wonderful place to listen to anything.
Not to mention their expanded menu and drinks. They now have beer and wine.
That's right. Who would think? Who would want that? I don't know. For me, I had an experience with story that was, I was writing a letter of support recommendation to my alma mater about my granddaughter's application. And, when you write about your granddaughters or your grandkids, it's just, poof. So who's going to believe you? I mean, and I kind of knew the admissions guy, and I didn't know, all that stuff. So I'm sitting there, and I remembered a story about this young lady when she was 7 years old and played her harp at my mother's funeral. And I wove that story into the letter of recommendation, and I got to tell it to my friends at Cafe Lena, and it was just, other than stomping and clapping with you,
it was a lovely story, and I had heard that story when she was 7. But yes, it was just.
So the last Tuesday of the month.
No, the fourth Tuesday of the month. Because occasionally there are 5 Tuesdays in a month.
When you got that, it's the fourth Tuesday.
Yes.
7 o'clock. If you want to tell, you got to be there a little early, but it's just a great experience of listening to stories and being in a wonderful community.
And only $5.
Who was that?
Best
I
deal
don't
ever.
know.
Did you just hear a voice?
Yes, I did, and there was clapping and stomping from over there too.
Okay. This is we're gonna have to introduce our secret guest because they're not secret anymore.
So secret.
But they remain quiet for at least 2 minutes.
Christie Keegan is with us, and she's from up around Saratoga, and she is one of the 3 storytellers that has brought life to storytelling at Cafe Lena for the first part, and Karen Pillsworth, who is the storytelling laureate of Kingston, New York. And as far as we know, she's the only storytelling laureate in New York State. There may be a second, but there's no second to her.
Oh, thank you. That was
How about that?
It's definitely the original.
The original. And they're here today because they're part of a production effort, a sponsor effort, an overview effort of something called Sharing the Fire, which is the regional northeastern United States gathering of storytellers. Isn't that right?
That is right.
And it goes back years, and we are so fortunate to have it right in our
40 of them.
backyard.
About 40 years.
And Christie, you're like running the show, aren't you?
No,
Yes.
I'm a co-ringmaster, but I got to tell you, everybody else in the committee makes me look good.
Oh, is that is even best?
It is. I'm very happy.
And when is this coming up?
April 3rd, 4th, and 5th. It will be held at the Gideon Putnam in Saratoga Springs in historic Saratoga Spa State Park. There will be 18 workshops. There will be myriad, and I can't remember how many performances, enormous numbers of performances, 2 intensives. It is not just for storytellers. I feel like it's important for me to say that. It is for anybody who feels passionately about anything in the world. It's a good place to learn how to convey what you feel.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of things that we might not know about with our audience, what's a workshop and what's an intensive and those kinds of things that are elements of this program?
That's a very good question, Joe.
I got that question just before I perfected my, flat.
That was very good.
At home he goes, he's not just a pretty face.
There you go. The intensives are 2 longer workshops on Friday where you kind of go into depth. One of them is led by a longtime storyteller and folklorist who will be helping people craft complex personal pieces. And the other is being led, very different for us this year, a storyteller / comedian, comic from New York City who is going to be talking about kind of incorporating comedy and so forth in storytelling as part of the venue. Then on Saturday and Sunday, workshops are where you have a leader and you learn a skill. And those are wide-ranging. This year we have some pretty amazing people. We also have a keynote, an activist who will be talking about applied storytelling, how to use storytelling in service to something else, and we'll also offer a workshop. We will have an entire strand of stories on Saturday, performances where people can come. There will be one about Indigenous people. There will be hosted by person sitting in this room, Kate Dunning, and organized by New York tellers telling New York stories, which is going to be, it's the first time we've kind of done it this way. There's a panoply. There's something for everybody.
And there are fringes.
And there are fringes.
Explain what that is.
A fringe is a piece, a fringe is a story that might be a little bit outside the norm. It might be a long personal piece. It could be sometimes it's more of an adult story, and I don't necessarily mean adult in the adult way, but
Not a grown-up story.
not yet a grown-up story.
grown-up story.
In fact, most of the pieces that you will hear are actually for adults, although children will certainly be appropriate for some of them. But fringes are maybe a little bit edgy. They might deal with topics that people might not always be comfortable with, and that could be anything from sex to mourning to, well, now I won't be able to think of a single thing, of course, on the spot. A little edgy.
Eileen Egan-Mack is doing a piece on Elizabeth Hamilton.
Exactly.
A long piece on that.
And they're often longer pieces that you wouldn't, if you're doing something like the Oleo, which happens on Saturday night, you do a 10-minute story. But in a fringe, you get an opportunity to tell for an hour, maybe longer. It sometimes incorporates song and spoken language.
Now, there's 2 ways I want to kind of pitch this. First, if you're interested in storytelling at all as a thing you'd like to do with students or with people at work, whatever, think about coming to this, because this is like the graduate level course in storytelling in a weekend. And there'll be people there that you'll never forget listening to or meeting over coffee. So that's the first thing. The second thing, if you go to the website, you'll find these performances are going on, and you can come and go to the performances without registering for the big conference, even though that's very reasonable. But those are also great opportunities to listen to stories and to meet and connect with people. And it is a wonderful, wonderful element. And our hats are off to all you guys that are working on this thing to pull it together.
Because Karen is co-chair of Publicity.
Publicity, bless you.
Well, Lorraine Harton-Gilardi, I was telling Christy before we came on, is really in charge, and I'm just her gopher, because she's wonderful. And she just says, Karen, come do story by story. Karen, go do Cafe Lena. Karen, give out these postcards. Karen, go speak here. And I do.
And we are grateful.
But I'm happy to have her leadership in this. And publicity is very important, and it's important especially right now because this is coming up in April, and I can't believe that January is already done. So this is coming quickly.
Right.
And I do want to stress, and I have sent out to all of my friends who live in this area who might not want to come for the whole conference, for all those workshops, to come for some of those single performances and to see it. And you might be captured by that, and next year say, oh, there's so much more I want to do, and come back for the whole conference.
You also have the ability to buy one day of the conference rather than the entire conference, which is nice. There is a first-time attender, a very greatly reduced fee for a first-time attender, and it also is unique in that the conference originally about 40 years ago started in Boston, and rarely leaves the East Coast. The East Coast people have had a very difficult time letting go of it. We convinced them this year that it was not really as far as they thought. They thought Albany was far.
Well, no, they thought when we were at UMass for 3 years in Amherst.
That was forever.
That was the far wilderness.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that was far wilderness.
So
2 hours west of Boston.
but also a great many people here. And I would like to emphasize that if you are a teacher, a librarian, if you believe if you are a member of a faith community and believe strongly in something that faith community is doing, if you are passionate about anything from the environment to animal rights to human rights, there is something this conference can offer you, this skill set that allows you to be able to reach your audience and put your ideas into their hearts and in their minds in a way you might not have available to you now.
Many people in business are now taking storytelling courses to explain the purpose of their business.
The mission of their business,
Right.
absolutely.
To not only their customers, but to their employees. Trial lawyers are going to storytelling classes to learn how to tell their clients' stories to the jury, and I guess the judge too.
That's right. It is not just for storytellers, and I think this is the first year we've really talked about it in this way, and I'd like to continue to talk about it in this way.
And there's even another way of thinking about it that I just will reflect on. We're all storytellers. And sometimes you discover that the story within you or the reference you want to provide is better with story. And what I've learned is a little method and a little understanding of that process helps a great deal in how well the message is received or the education is given. And that's the fundamental learning point, I guess, of sharing the floor, is your own technique, and then also your own enthusiasm for storytelling that gets pumped up. So, well,
we're a great group of people.
Oh,
We're a
we're a lot of
fabulous
fun.
group of people. We're a lot of fun.
fun.
And the Gideon is a beautiful place to do it. And yeah.
all of those things. And it's springtime in Saratoga, so there probably won't be much snow on the ground.
Why? Why did you say that?
The mosquitoes won't be out,
They will not be out.
That's
No
right.
black flies. No.
not so much on the flowers.
All this talk about storytelling, maybe do one of you folks have a story?
Oh, I bet we do.
I bet we do.
Want to caucus on that? Let us know.
No. We know what we're doing.
All right.
Okay, and why don't you move your cup out of sight, because...
There we go. Distracting.
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So I decided to tell this story today because I wanted to scare Joe and Kate, because this is a first time out of the box story. And I feel like a lot of times as storytellers, people ask us to tell for different venues, and there's different themes, and you have to kind of find stories to fit those things. And sometimes stories come to us. And they come for a reason, and maybe because I have grandchildren now, this story came to me. So I'd like to share this with you. The little boy hated museums, hated them. But his mother loved them. So every weekend she would pack him up in the car and off to another museum they would go. And every week he thought to himself, I hate walking on the blue carpet. I hate standing behind the velvet ropes. I hate not being able to touch anything. But his mother thought it was wonderful, and off they went. Well, on this weekend, he was particularly ornery and did not want to go. But he got in the car with his mother, and he went through the rooms, and finally he said, please, 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 can we leave? And she said, well, we came to this museum for a special reason. There's a new exhibit. I promise it's the last room we'll go into, and then we'll go have something to eat. So the little boy rolled his eyes, and off they went. They walked into a room. He walked on the blue rug. He stood behind the velvet ropes, and he looked. It was a huge room, and there was only one object in it. And he looked at it. It was, I don't know, it was a piece of wood standing on 4 poles. And he very clearly read the sign that his mother showed him how to do to explain what was in the museum, and it said one word, table. And he looked at his mother and he goes, great, can we go now? And she said, well, did you read it? And he said, yes, it says table, whatever that is. I guess that's what this is. It's a table. And she said, well, you know I have to tell you more about it. And he said, of course you do. So his mother said, now this was something that people had in their houses a long time ago. My grandmother had one, so I remember it. And it was a place where people would come and they would sit around it and they would eat their meals. They would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The little boy looked at it and he said, well, where's the TV? Is there a place for your iPhone or your iPad? And she said, oh no, those things weren't even invented yet. But let me tell you, so people would have breakfast and there would be scrambled eggs and French toast and bacon frying and the smell of coffee perking on the stove. And then everyone would sit down and eat before they went to work or school. Well, they didn't just like pop a waffle in the toaster or eat some Cheerios. Well, they could have, his mother said, but they knew about nutrition back then. They knew that it was important to have a good meal before you went out for a long day of work or to school. Huh, said the little boy. What about lunch? Well, lunch sometimes was pretty fast. It might be just a sandwich or a bowl of soup and a piece of fruit. But dinner, said the mother, dinner was amazing. Everybody would come and they would sit around the table and the table would be set. It would be set where? It already had its own room. Where would you put it? No, said the mother. That means you would set it a place setting. There would be a dish, and on the left there would be a napkin, a cloth napkin with a fork, and on the right there'd be a knife and a spoon, and a real glass would sit right in front of the plate. And then steaming bowls and platters of food would be brought in and set on the table, and the whole family would come and hold hands and bow their heads and say a prayer, thankful for the food on the table, for the people who prepared it, for the farmers who brought it to us, and for each other. And then the food would be passed, a plate one to the other, each taking only enough for themselves to make sure there was enough for everybody else sitting at the table. And then they would talk and laugh, and they would always ask, what did you do at school today? And just like you, they would say, nothing. But they would poke and prod until they heard about something, a spelling test or a game played at recess. And then there'd be dessert. Oftentimes it was a can of fruit opened and placed in little bowls that they would eat, and then the parents would sit and sip coffee, but the children would have to be asked to be excused. Excused for what? What did they do that they needed to be excused? No, said the mother. They have to say, may I please be excused in order to leave the table. And if they had finished everything on their plate, then they could get up and play. The parents would sit and drink their coffee before they would call them back to do the dishes. You mean put the dishes in the dishwasher? There were no dishwashers, said his mother. One of the grown-ups would put the dishes into hot, soapy water, and then they would rinse them and they would pass them to one of the children who would dry them with a cloth and then give them to the other parent who would put them away. And they had to do this every night, said the little boy. Every night, said the mother. But then the weekend would come, and then all the relatives would come for Sunday dinner every Sunday, and they would have to put leaves in the table. They went outside and got leaves and put them in the table. And what was the purpose of that? No, said his mother. These were like big wooden rectangles, and the table would be opened up, and the leaves would be put in so it could get bigger and bigger. My grandmother had a leaf stand in the corner of the room where there were 6 leaves in it, and you could take out each one until the table got bigger and bigger and bigger until it could fit everyone. And people would sit a long time around that table. Now the little boy was curious. Well, okay, but still, it takes up a lot of room. It takes up a whole room, and you just use it for eating? No, said the mother, no. There were lots of things done at the table. People would do crossword puzzles. People would do jigsaw puzzles where they would have 1,000 little pieces, and they would have to push it to the end of the table and scrunch at the other end and eat until that jigsaw puzzle was finished. The morning paper was read at the table. Sometimes in winter, on long, cold nights, there would be board games like Monopoly and Trouble played for hour after hour. Laundry was folded at the table. Sometimes late in the night, parents would sit and write out their bills and try to figure out how they would make ends meet, or they would make their grocery lists. Sometimes, said the mother, after the children were in bed on Friday night, the parents would invite the neighbors over to play cards, and they'd have highballs. She didn't even want to explain that to the little boy. And so she went on and on, talking about all of these wonderful things, and the little boy really was interested. And she looked and she said, I bet I've talked enough today, and I think it's time to get something to eat. And she reached down for the little boy's hand, and he looked back at that table one more time. And he reached up and he put his hand in hers, and he said, are we going to get something to eat? She said, yes. He said, do you think we could go someplace where they might have a table? And that's the story. I just really feel like
I love that.
the technology is wonderful, and I appreciate technology. But I feel from all the time I spend with children that they're just becoming such isolates, and that they're not having those wonderful conversations or listening to those stories or being part of a whole family gathered around a table. And, I don't think we're going to see the table in museums soon, but I think there are plenty of families who don't spend time around the table. And I learned so much. I learned how to be a storyteller at the table.
Starting first as a story listener.
That's right. You remember that story. But I do think it's important. And thank you for letting me share that first time out of the box story.
That was a great story. Thank you.
And I was going to say, my grandparents played pinochle. They had 2 couples that they would play airplane pinochle. So instead of having a kitty, the one who won the bid, you probably don't play pinochle, their partners, they would declare, okay, spades is going to be trumps, and then their partners would give them 2 cards, and to improve the bid winner's hand, and then the winner would dump junk on them. So if you had an ace or two of the trumps, you would pass it over. And, so there'd be one really great hand.
And so that's what this is about. Every place I go now, I say to people, what else do you do at your table besides, eating? And people come up with amazing things, and then they start to remember all the things and all the memories and everything that went on at the table. And it's great to hear all those things.
So my grandparents did not have a leaf stand. I had never
heard
of
one.
that. I understood the concept very much, but
it just stood.
It's
yeah.
And you just slid them in and slid them out.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
My leaves and my dining room table, when I wanted, I put them under the sofas in the
Absolutely, that's where ours are.
Keep them flat. Yes, we do the same.
Yeah, but anyway.
I was thinking, I ate dinner with my parents at our table until I left for college. And then again when I came home to visit. I mean, that's
where you sat. And you sat there.
And you sat there.
Yeah, until you were excused.
And as you were telling, that sometimes when you're listening to a story, you go to other places. It's not that I wasn't listening all the time.
Oh, sure, Joe. Okay.
And well, at least I was awake. But you begin to see, and you're around the table in your grandparents' dining room. And I was right there, and they were all there. I'm listening to you, and I'm at that other table, and that's that's what I refer to as kind of a generative story, because you've stimulated something in the listener that isn't in you necessarily, but it's their response to the emotion of listening to the story. And I just commend you to that. I think that's a great story, and I'm so pleased that we'll have it with this tape of this show, because I think it's a very valuable element for storytelling. More than just a good example. So, there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, that I was at my mother's parents' apartment, and after World War II, housing was short. So my mother and father moved in with them to a bedroom on the 3rd floor, and my youngest aunt, who was a teenager, was in the other bedroom on the 3rd floor, and the third daughter in the family and her husband and their baby daughter, Laurel, were in the back bedroom, and my grandparents were in the front bedroom. And so there were, and eventually my infant brother joined them. So eventually there were three people families, you know. So there were 9 of them around the dining room table, 1 bathroom. Let's just pause that for a moment here. And my grandmother didn't like to put leftovers away. So won't you eat that? There's just a little bit. And my grandfather would say, save it and I'll have it with an egg for breakfast. And I have told that story often enough that my son, when I say, oh, look, there's just a little bit left, he says, save it, I'll have it with an egg for breakfast. Not that he ever does. Well, no, steak, if we have leftover steak, he will have that, well, no eggs, actually, for breakfast.
I ran a shelter for a number of years. It makes me think. And every Friday night, I would make a formal meal. And I would put a tablecloth on the table, and I would set the table. And the number of children who had never done that.
Yeah.
And I would teach them how to set the table. I had children who'd never set the table, who had never sat down at a peaceful meal where people asked about their day. And it was wonderful to watch them shift into this other place.
Yeah.
Calm place to eat.
It is. I did a program for a few years with homeless preschoolers, and we would do the same thing. You know, they'd have to help prepare a meal, whether it was toast or whatever, and set the table and sit there and really sit there. And when you're 4, that's even harder to really sit there. But, you know, they did it, and they came to appreciate it. They came to wait for that when they would come. That was a big deal, something they had never done and something they enjoyed. So the table is important in a lot of places.
Well, there was I just realized just this one thing. There was a boy who had he struggled with some hyperactivity stuff. It was very difficult for him to stand still. In fact, he couldn't often. But he would, although he couldn't sit at the table easily, he would stand at the table until we were all done, because it meant so much to him. Yeah, he'd never been included that way. Good story.
Thanks.
Story.
And does it have a title yet?
The table.
Oh, duh.
The table. The table.
It is the table, yes.
Okay. Shall we go on to
I
coming
think we
events?
need to hear about what else is going on in the area besides sharing the fire, but go for it.
So on March 2nd, Joe knows all about this because it's his series, First Monday Tales and Stuff. Open mic for storytelling, music, and spoken word. Why am I speaking for Joe?
Well, it's because you do such a good job. You really do. And this is a wonderful program. And Marty Gillard is an old friend to storytelling and many people. And it's stories with an Irish lilt. And I've listened to Marty tell stories, and I often travel to other places because she is very generative. So I encourage you to come down. We have cider and donuts.
And where
intermission.
is that?
It's in the Stockade in the First Reformed Church in the historic Poling Chapel, which is named after one of the 4 chaplains who was sunk on the Dorchester during World War II, and was the minister of that church before he went to war. So there's a lot of stories in the room, and join us.
Then on Thursday, March 5th, there will be a meeting of the Interfaith Story Circle, Stories of Bridge Builders. And they will have 3 featured tellers, 3 clergy members from Christian, Jewish, and Muslim. And it'll be preceded by a vegetarian potluck and then which is optional for you to attend, and then storytelling 7 to 9 at Congregation Beth Emeth on Academy Road in Albany. They have monthly meetings September through June at different houses of worship where people tell stories of their faith and traditions, and they discover how much they all have in common. And then a series in Albany on the second Tuesday of the month, which is March 10th, the Front Parlor series. A topic is announced a couple of weeks ahead of time, and people can come and tell short stories, 5 or 7 minute personal stories, at Little Peck's on Broadway in Troy. That's been running for 7, 8 years,
7, 8
I
years,
think.
yeah.
It's changed venues, but in Troy. Then right here at the Colony Town Library will be a monthly meeting of Story Circle, the Capital District. We have a meeting every month of the year. And you can come and share stories, please do not read them, and get as much or as little feedback as you like.
So if you're kind of interested in learning just a little bit more about storytelling, that meeting here at the Colony Library is a great opportunity to kind of get familiar in an informal setting. So we look forward to seeing you. Come on out.
And then to finish our 13th season at Proctor's, we being Story Circle at Proctor's with our series called Word Plays, we'll have a session on stories all about lemons to lemonade. On Sunday, March 22nd, 2 p.m. at the lower level, one might call it the basement of Proctor's, also known as the Hearst Education Center or the Underground, with Claire Beetlestone, Betty Cassidy, Joe Doolittle, Margaret French, Bonnie Mayan, Claire Nolan, Sandy Schumann, and someone else to be determined. So please come and join us. It's a modest fee, a little more than, the open mic up at Cafe Lena, but what you'd pay to go to a movie. And featured on the 4th Tuesday of the month, September to June, at Cafe Lena will be Lorraine Harton-Gilardi and Karen Pillsworth. Who the heck is she? Did I say March 24th? So that's the month, and just want to remind us what our 13th season, I guess, looked like. 5 word plays and 1 celebration. You can get stories on demand from our website. Go to storycircle@proctors.org, click on YouTube for over 200 stories. And you can watch our TV shows on demand. Story Circle at Proctor, click on Story by Story.
Wow, that's a lot of stories.
I know.
And that doesn't even include, the next month.
Oh, right.
Story that with Sharing the Fire coming up just over the
Right.
Over the horizon.
over the month there. So there's a lot of good opportunities to listen and tell some stories. So we commend those to you, and they're all on the Story Circle at proctors.org website. Yep.
And I'm going to make sure to invite everybody to come to Cafe Lena because that's where I'm celebrating my birthday.
Oh, is that your birthday?
I'm telling it on my birthday, so I'm sending it out to all of my friends who live up here and say, you must come because I'm
fabulous.
celebrating my birthday.
You're sending it to all your friends, so there'll be at least 2 people there?
At least 2. There might be 3.
That's one day after my half birthday.
There we go.
There you
So we'll
go.
celebrate everything, but yes, I'm just, because I do think that sometimes you have to sneak people into storytelling. There's a lot of grown-ups who still think it's just for children, and they don't really know until you
And
get
that you're
them.
reading from a book.
Oh, yeah. And so they don't really know, but if you can sneak them in, under some other kind of shadow there, like a birthday or an anniversary, or, just come, we're going to eat, that's always good. If there's food,
Yeah, chocolate, wine, beer.
absolutely. And then, they come and they realize how much they enjoy stories. Can I mention just one other thing? Every Friday I work at Villa Veritas in Cohasset, New York, in a rehab with men and women who are in recovery. And when I first started, especially, I have to be sexist and say the men would really bristle. Storytelling. God, we're going to have storytelling, And it only took like one time really before they were like telling things, their own stories. And, I always say to them, we all have our timeline of our life. The most important story any of us has is our own story. And your time here at the villa is a defining moment in your story, but not the moment that defines you. And I say, think of all the good you did before you got here. And all of a sudden they realize that. And then I say, and you hold the pen in your hand to write the story when you leave here. And again, it was a sneaky way, to get these men who I would probably say many of them would not just attend storytelling, just invited for storytelling. But now they know what it is. And so anyway, I feel like I can sneak adults into learning the importance of listening to stories and sharing their own. So I'll try anything, right?
And remembering their own.
And remembering their own, which is a big
You
one.
became their cheerleader, right?
Yeah.
So, and they tell amazing, sometimes very sad, but oftentimes they'll say, I thought that memory was gone forever.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they'll tell something, and it's priceless for me to be in that audience and to listen to them share those stories.
Yeah, the more you think, the more you remember. I think your brain wanders into that section and you've lost the links to it, but when you spend more time there and the connections are remade and you go, oh, I remember my grandmother's kitchen smelled like cinnamon whenever she was making apple pie.
And they do, and we talk about having a memory box. And for some of them, we talk about the actual physical things you might put in there. But one day a gentleman said, I don't have a box. He said, but if I did, I would put in my baby's first smile and my grandfather's laugh and the smell of my grandmother's tomato sauce. And then everybody else in the room had a memory, and it was great. So, so I just wanted to mention that. I'll sneak people in however I can.
And some others you'll invite directly because it's your birthday.
Right,
That's right.
exactly.
Yes. A storytelling evangelist, looking like a retired kindergarten teacher, under the guise of.
Now, do we have another story?
Yes.
Do we have
We do.
time for another story?
Yes. Just say, Greg, should they switch places? Nope,
We
Greg
good?
has a comment.
Okay.
Sorry, we didn't discuss that ahead of time.
Greg is our producer, director, man extraordinaire, working all this.
He is the station
He's the reason that you are seeing us
and hearing us.
and hearing us. This story was also debuted at Cafe Lena. And it comes out of being a certain age, and I am at a certain age. I'm 70 now, and feeling a little bit invisible in places. And also because it's really fun sometimes to make fun of the healthcare industry, and that's what I'm going to do, despite the fact that I have doctors and nurses in my family. All apologies to everybody. So when I was about 16, I had a friend who had too much to drink, and he got in his car and decided to take off. And I thought, as a good friend, that I should stop him. And so I put my hand through the window to grab the keys just as he hit the gas. And I managed to pull myself out of the car, the top half of me, but the bottom half of me, my feet, went directly under both tires, breaking every toe in many ways. And so for my entire life, I've had Frankenfeet. They're not pretty. My toes kind of go this way and this way and this way. And over the years, however, about 5 or 6 years ago, I had them repaired. They broke all of them and they fixed all of them. And they're still Frankenfeet. At least the scars all run in one direction. But there's a condition that happens. It's called cellulitis. At certain times, if they get irritated, and I know what it is, and it needs an antibiotic. Not a difficult thing. And it's happened 3 or 4 or 5 times. I know my feet well. I've been living with them a long time. So I went to my local emergency care. And I waited, and the nurse came in, and I took off my shoe and my sock, and I explained everything, and she looked at my toe, and she said, yep, that's cellulitis, but you need the doctor to write a prescription. And I thought, well, all right. So I waited, and I waited in the way that you do, and the doctor came in, and he looks at my toe, and he said, well, yes, it does look like cellulitis. And I said, really, so then all I need, I've had a lot of experience, and I just need a prescription for an antibiotic. And he said, well, but it might be broken. And I said, well, it's not broken. And he said, well, how do you know? I said, because I know my feet really well, and I've broken them so many times, I would know if it was broken. He said, I think we should get an x-ray to make sure. I said, I don't need an x-ray. He said, but it might be broken. I said, okay. So if you take an x-ray and it is broken, what will you do for my foot? He goes, well, nothing. We don't do anything for a broken foot. So I said, well, then I don't think I need an x-ray. What I need is a prescription for an antibiotic for the cellulitis. He goes, well, that's cellulitis, but I think you should have an x-ray. 18 minutes of my life I spent in this conversation. He was less than half my age, and he was a very nice man. But I don't have 18 minutes to spare at this point in my life. So finally, I just, no, I'm not having an x-ray. Put my feet down, both of them. And he walked out of the room, and very differently. Most of the doctors there will shake your hand and say, I'm glad to have met you, and he was not glad to have met me, and he left. And I waited, and I waited, and I wondered if I was going to get a prescription. I wondered if anybody would ever come, or if he would just tell them I had left, and I would just sit there all day like a fool. And then finally the nurse came back in, and she had the prescription in her hand. And she gave it to me, and I kind of told her what had happened. And she burst out laughing, and she said, oh, that one. Yeah. Yeah, he's been looking for the zebra in the horse herd for a long time.
Looking for the zebra
in a horse herd. Yep, in a herd of horses. That's how she put it. Yeah.
Man, oh man.
Not a good listener.
Not a good listener. He should come to the conference. He should definitely come to the conference.
He should sign up.
I don't think we have a workshop explicitly on how to listen.
But maybe we should. Maybe we should. Yeah.
And how to watch. And oh, the steam is coming out of her ears.
And how to listen to somebody who might actually know something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time, this aging thing.
Yeah.
But we are becoming elders and not elderly.
That's right. I am definitely not elderly.
No.
Oh, no.
No. So elders we are.
Yeah.
There's a whole language in healthcare about patient-centered care, and you'll hear the CEOs and people talking about it. And at the interface of the patient and the staff, doctor, nurse, it's really where it comes, and often that's the translation that either doesn't make it or it makes it so well that you're just blown away by how good that person is. But we need to do more of really what it means to operationalize patient-centered.
I was struck. I have a 90-year-old acquaintance, and I went to visit her in the hospital, and she had suffered an injury and was not able to move well, and the doctor came in and just sort of moved her gown. And I said to her, would you like me to leave the room? It felt disrespectful to me to be sitting there with her. I'm sure it's a female doctor, it surprised me, exposing her. And I said, this might be a private time for you. Do you want me to leave? And she said no. She was holding my hand, and she said no. And the doctor said, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, I might also draw the curtain. And I was shocked. This is a hospital. And so that was the thing that actually, sort of the precipitous thing. And then the foot thing happened. And I thought, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so this is my thing now. It's my thing. I'm a cranky old lady in cubicle 3.
I had a wonderful dentist, and he retired. And then I was assigned to his partner, who would say hello when he came into the room for the final exam after the cleaning, and then would proceed to only talk to the dental hygienist. And when he would say, oh, come, then he'd come over to open, and then he would talk to her, and it was like, it happened like twice, and the next time it was time for me to make my checkup, I said, I don't want to see that dentist. I am just a mouth to him. And the receptionist kind of snorted. And
no, but I think it's real. Yeah. And if healthcare continues to escalate in cost, at the very least, I want better care.
Mm-hmm. Let's reminded of another segue. I have a friend who is part of the cast of the second-year medical students, where they get to interview a patient who's not a patient, but your school.
Okay, yeah, fun.
And she just can take them places they never thought they were going to go. And having a glass of wine with her and listening to some of the debrief is really good.
Oh, I bet.
So I can only attest that there's a few great hearts working on this issue, at least at the medical school level. But,
no, I would say that my GP is extraordinary, and my pulmonologist, both of them, extraordinary people who will spend an hour with me. But there's some youngins who need some learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I was, when I was pregnant, it was my second pregnancy. I had a tubal pregnancy first and lost the baby and a tube. And so I was at, not my OBGYN, one of her partners, for like the 2-month visit or something. And he said, it was a time when ultrasounds were not routinely given. Mm-hmm. He said, would you like an ultrasound to confirm that this pregnancy is the fetus is in the right place? I said, yes. I didn't know I could do that. I had only had an ultrasound when it was, anyways.
But see, these are the things you learn around the table.
Yes.
These are the stories that we're sharing.
So when I saw that little thumb dancing, and that's just what it looked like, that was when I finally let myself believe that I was pregnant. My husband was, Kate's pregnant, and I couldn't let myself go there.
On a funny and yet annoying note, depending, for the women in the room who probably have had a gynecological exam at some point in your lives, and you have a wife who certainly has had. My GYN was out of town and called away in an emergency, and I had my annual exam, and I wasn't going to miss that because that's a 6-month wait, and so I went anyway. And the woman, GYN, who said, well, let's see how Mr. Uterus is doing. And to God. And I said, if Mr. Uterus is in there, I'm leaving.
No.
And she was a Harvard-educated, very bright woman, and I sat up and said, we need to have a conversation now. I was in my early 40s. I was old enough to be able to do that. And I said, no, but never mind the disrespect, but at least the gender stuff, let's do this right. I was floored.
Mr. Uterus.
I was floored. I am not often nonplussed, but I was darn close.
Miss Penis?
I knew that was going to come up.
So we have certainly digressed.
And we've reached the lowest level we've ever reached in this whole series.
I think we've just gone a little to R.
Okay, so this will be the next fringe that I do.
That's right.
This is what a fringe is like.
And you can call on people. Okay, yes.
This is it. And think about yours.
But let's come back to another issue of the table, because I think for families, tables are certainly key. And I was thinking, I was traveling back to the medical center, because I'm a chaplain there. And one of the elements of being on call as a chaplain is you meet, in this case, my good friend Harlan Rantmeyer and a couple of people at the table at 7:15. You're finishing up, they're coming on, and their purpose in being there is to listen to what happened the night before. And then other people join, and the conversation moves to what is in the life of the management team of the hospital, because that's what's there. And so the idea of the table being the sharing point, and what organizations don't do often, is they don't come together at the table to build community around what their purpose is. And I was thinking about that table at the medical center, where that happened 4 or 5 days a week, with really a bonding element at 7:30 in the morning. You think about that one for the second table. I'm going to set a table here. That's a great story. That was a great story.
And I think to bring it back to sharing the fire,
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
that I have learned so many wonderful things and so many stories, not in the workshops, but sitting around the table all the time, whether the meal or you're just meeting somebody to sit and have a cup of coffee and hear their stories, not the professional stories. And so every aspect of sharing the fire, from the time you get there and you're greeted to getting your little packet and figuring out where you're going to go, and then sitting down with people and hopefully seeing old friends, but also Christy and I were talking beforehand that we have a lot of old friends.
Long term.
Yes.
We knew them last century.
Yes, we did. And so I encourage, younger people to come. And one of the things at the Spiritual Center where I go this year, they're celebrating the Year of the Elder, and they're giving anybody who brings somebody 20 years younger a discount to try to get younger people, and younger, I mean, 20 years younger than me is, in your 40s, not in your 20s, but just, I think we need to, as a group, encourage people who are younger to come, and they can try it out easily at Sharing the Fire because they don't have to sign up for the whole conference, and they can just have a taste of it to come back. But I think it's important, I wish that everybody...
Also, the first-time rate is so low. It's so low.
To bring those younger people back, and they'll even though they're not performers, they'll share something about themselves at that table to move to the next level. So I think there's so much at Sharing the Fire that's beyond what we can put in a brochure.
The first one I ever went to was at Leslie College, so it's forever and ever ago, probably 30 years ago. And I remember walking in, and it was early. Registration had just happened, and everybody was seated in the cafeteria. And I walked into the room, and you could hear the buzz. It was like hearing a beehive drone. And I remember stepping into this room and being sort of overwhelmed by the number of people who were talking to each other, who were all really cheerful and blah, 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 blah. Thinking, how am I ever, this is a lot of people for me to get to meet. And I remember sliding into a chair next to a table and taking out my brochure and kind of looking at it. And then the person next to me slid over and said, "Oh, what are you taking?" And suddenly there I was at the table, part of the group. Yeah.
Yep, the connection was made.
Yep.
You have an introverted side?
I have a seriously introverted side. I'm probably the worst introvert you've ever met. I have good social skills, but I would spend most of my life with my dog if I could. Yeah. Yes.
I think that's true of a lot of storytellers.
Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely true.
Yeah.
Unless I am a storyteller.
Yeah.
And then you can't stop me talking. In fact, when I've gone to conferences, the keynote address, it's the hardest thing is to get the audience to stop talking. Yeah. We are professional talkers. These are people we probably haven't seen in at least a year. And as an introvert, when I go to large gatherings of non-storytellers, I think of 3 questions I can ask somebody, because I'm not really good at small talk. A wedding. How do you know the bride or the groom? Whatever. I come up with storytellers. You need one question. What do you do with storytelling? And maybe 2 hours later, you need something else.
It's really
we are
true.
really passionate about what we do, because I think storytelling can really change the world, and in any major problem, it fits in somewhere.
And so many people use it so differently. Mm-hmm. So many people. There are therapists who use it, advocates who use it, artists who use it. I did coaching, story coaching, with a friend of mine who's an artist. She's a fabric artist, and she thought she wanted to be a storyteller. And so I did story coaching. This is probably 15 or 20 years ago. And she came, 6 or 8 times, and then she showed up, the 9th time, and she said, "I don't know that I want to be a storyteller anymore, but I think this has changed my life." And it did. She opened her own studio. She ended the relationship she was in. She moved. Her entire life changed because she was telling her story, in a way that she could hear it for the first time, because somebody was actually paying attention, which is really all you do when you coach. And I still run into her. And I told her about Sharing the Fire. She said, "Well, maybe now I'll be a storyteller." But in all of the years since then, she has been a well-known fabric artist in Saratoga. And
So you helped her find her story.
Mm-hmm, that's right. And then she ran with it. Boom.
And said, "You don't fit with my story."
Right.
Exactly. It was pretty astonishing.
You've been stomping on it, or
I hear she was living in a 3rd-floor apartment at the time. That was your grandparents.
Yes.
Oh, right. Yeah. I have to remember to ask my aunt. Okay.
There we go. Get the rest of the story.
I grew up living in a 3-bedroom house, but occasionally being woken up by my father's nightmares. They're after me, and I always assumed they were Germans, because he was in World War II. KWBC, your nightmares. I've been meaning
Note to
ask
self.
her.
Note to self.
Yes, right. Yeah.
This is where the technology is good.
Wisdom more, remembering things less. That's why I write down my silly jokes, because...
I said, you have so many, you have to
Yeah.
write them down.
Yes.
So,
And anytime you want the collection, just let me know. And I'm
That's
happy to share
okay,
it.
Kate. We'll let you continue to surprise us. That's it.
Well, no, you might have a use for them.
That's
well, yeah, like when my grandchildren always come up with, silly jokes, and I never have one to say back to them, so now I know where to go.
Yes, yes.
The Book of Kate.
Kate, the Book of Kate.
Do you know what one snowman said to the other?
No.
Does everything smell like carrots to you? That's appropriate for the...
That's right.
Yes.
So is the dinosaur.
Okay, well, I don't know exactly how old they are.
Well,
so.
one is 9 today.
Okay.
1 is 9. Oh,
The only granddaughter is 9 today.
that's great.
So,
Oh, so you became a grandmother 9 years ago?
10 years.
10 years ago.
Yes. My children
Oh.
decided that they needed to have, one came and said they were pregnant, and then a couple months later, the other one came. So those were a few apart. Then the second round, one came, and the next day, the other one came.
Wow.
And those 2 children are only 8 days apart. So it's like having twins from different families. So there are 4 now, and it's wonderful. And I do Camp Nona, and we have a great time.
It's a little competitive of your children.
I did it. So yeah, but I think this is the end. But you never say that. So anyway,
You
it's
don't know.
wonderful.
You don't know.
It is wonderful.
Beatrice. In some other show, we'll do a thing on grandchildren, and I will tell you the story of our bonus grandchildren, which is a way you can acquire grandchildren without having them be your real grandchildren. And, modest investment, time and energy, a lot of great feedback and wonder. So,
All right.
stay tuned.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun.
So we have a little over 2 minutes left.
Well, I say let's run through just one more time all the real facts about sharing the fire so people remember again when it is. And Christy?
Okay, so on Friday, April 3rd, there will be 2 intensives, and then in the evening, there will be a performance by the comedian who is delivering one of the intensives. On Saturday morning, Sherry Norfolk is going to be our keynote, and we'll also do a workshop immediately after the keynote. We will have a variety of other workshops during the day, as well as performances running pretty much on and off all day. There will be swaps. I forgot to talk about swaps. Oh, heavens to Betsy. A swap is where people just come together relatively informally with a pretty loose theme, usually, and just swap stories. And you are welcome to go and just listen, or you're welcome to go and participate. There will be some during the day, and then Saturday evening is the Olio, which is an incredible performance. It's a lineup of 8 tellers.
Oh, juried.
Jury tellers, and with a hidden jury, and they each tell a story of about 10 minutes, and it's an incredible way to see the myriad ways in which story can be used. And then after that, there will probably be at least one swap in the evening. The next morning, there will be another workshop, and then Children at the Well, which is a group in which children from different faith traditions come together to tell stories of their faith tradition. And they will be performing on Sunday morning, which is the first time we've ever done something quite like this. And that is also available to the public for a nominal fee, and they're an incredible group. And then I can't remember if there's a workshop after that or not.
I
think there is. There's one.
Noon.
Yes, and so there is something. So it would be impossible not to find something wonderful. If you're a first-time person, go online, look up the website, and you probably have it there, and I won't remember it. And
it's in front of
Northeast-
you on the screen. As
thank
we
you.
speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
But first-time tellers, first-time attendees, there's an incredible bargain to come. But even if you just want to do the performances or just want to come for one day, try it.
Okay.
No matter what you do.
Now we have run out of time.
There we go.
Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
Kate.
coming.
Thank you, Joe.
And we hope you'll come back.
Much good cheer.
Absolutely.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.